The Legio Krytos. Worst Legio in the game? Let's have a look. Hello, and welcome to Maximal Fire. I'm Alex.
And I'm Johnny.
And welcome back to part 2 of our latest series of podcasts. Like, we've split all of our podcasts into two as of like today. So whereas before you had one podcast, which would be a couple of hours long, talking about events and talking about Legio Deep Dives. Now we're bringing you two separate podcasts, each focusing on a different thing. So if you haven't checked out our podcast, which was our discussion about Beachhead, go ahead and listen to that first. And then come back to this one where we're going to be talking about the Legio Krytos in the latest of our deep dives. And to help us talk about that today, we're joined by current, it really rankles me to say this, current Maximal Fire reigning champion, Stuart Oliver, who has a bit of experience with Krytos. Hello, Stu. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening, and thank you for having me, guys.
You're welcome.
If we don't inflate the ego too much, there's only so much that the camera can contain of his head.
Yeah, it's already bulging because of mine as well.
Already getting bigger as we speak.
So thanks for joining us, Stu. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you, guys, and thank you for having me, especially for this deep dive into a legion I'm definitely passionate about.
And you're fresh from another tournament as well, I understand, over the weekend.
Yeah, I went down to the Grimsby's Titanicus event just the weekend gone. Had a great time, 3 games on a Sunday, and came back with the win from that tournament. So no complaints here.
Someone needs to stop him.
His reign of terror must be ended. I haven't worked out if maybe like Stu's good or is everybody else terrible. I haven't. I'm not sure. But I mean, without inflating your ego too much, Stu, like, what is that 5? I was trying to work out the maths of how many events that means that you've placed first in. You've certainly all 3 of our recent Maximal Fire ones: Beachhead 2022, Reactor Meltdown with a Vengeance in the summer, and Beachhead 2023. You were top ranked player and in the top team. Is it 5 events though in the last sort of year, 18 months that you've won?
Yeah. So the South Shields one again that I participated in because me and Andy taking turns to run. So the last one I participated in, I won, and then obviously Grimsby as well. So five so far.
So hopefully you know how to play AT.
Fingers crossed, or I just can roll dice really well.
Okay, right, Johnny. This is a good start. We don't normally bring in extra people for these things, so yeah. I think we're in a good position to kick off and start talking about Krytos.
Absolutely.
Okay. So Legio Krytos, arguably the worst Legio in the game, hands down, worst Legio in the game, until they released the Titan Legios book, right?
Yeah, I'd say they were definitely down there as a bottom tier Legio until they got a revamp.
Yeah, so they were released originally in the I believe it was the Titan Death book, which was the first expansion that they released. First, Titan Death, Doom of Molech, I think it was.
Yeah.
And yeah, so to give you an idea, if you weren't around at the time, people would rather run no Legio rules than run the Krytos Legio rules. And in fact, that's exactly what Ben did. No, Ben actually did run them as Krytos, even though they were dreadful at the November 2021 event that we did, because he wanted to take Hammer of Tyrants. So he had to take them, even though their rules back then were terrible. But they very quickly became arguably pretty decent, as we're going to find
Very
out
good.
today. So we'll do the usual thing that we usually do. We're going to talk through the rules, and then we're going to kind of like give our 2 cents on them. So nice kind of selection of different abilities and traits that Krytos have. Their first one is a trait called Doom of Worlds. The Legio Krytos is a hammer that knows only one way of waging war: to crush its enemies utterly beneath the repeated blows of its titans. While the Legio fielded Warhound and Reaver Titans, its commander favoured deploying heavier Titans into potent battle groups and using their massed firepower to obliterate continents. When fielding an Axiom Maniple or Myrmidon Maniple, a Legio Krytos player may take a Warlord Titan in place of a Reaver as part of the Maniple's mandatory components. When fielding a Regia Maniple or Precept Maniple, a Legio Krytos Maniple may take a Warbringer Nemesis Titan in place of a Warhound as part of its mandatory components. Well, this is wordy, this one. When a Warbringer Nemesis Titan is substituted into a Regia Maniple in this way, courtiers can merge their Void Shields as if the Warbringer were a king or queen. In addition, when fielding a Fortis Maniple, a Legio Krytos player may take a single Warlord or a single Warbringer Nemesis in place of a Reaver Titan as part of its mandatory components. So we see this quite often, don't we, across a lot of Legios, these kind of engine swaps, chassis changes. This
Never
one,
this comprehensive.
yeah, and this is quite complicated, right? This is it sounds like quite a lot of options, but like there's actually only a handful of maniples it's impacting.
It's just the good version of it, right? Like compared to like Tritonus or something like that. You know, you've got some very specific situations in there that lists out.
Yeah, but maybe a bit more flexibility than say Tritonus, which I think, as we talked about in our last one, like on paper it sounds really good, but then when you factor in the fact that they don't count as the Titans of its type,
Yeah.
it becomes a little bit more restrictive. Whereas, as we're seeing here with like the Regia, like the Warbringer, like it specifically calls out it does a little bit more flexibility. What's your experience with this one, Stu?
So I'm just going to be one of these people that generally doesn't use it actually as a Krytos player. The reason being is it's the heavier Titan chassis that you're having to swap and change, as I'm sure Tritonus with Warlords will know. That you start racking the points up so quick when you start taking out the smaller classes for the bigger ones. And when you're trying to squeeze those points into a list, this does impact it. It has some great benefits, but points wise it does take away from spending on upgrades and stuff like that.
Absolutely. It racks up so quickly with those heavier Titans, and I think unless you've got a very, very specific game plan in place with one of the maniples, you're probably okay to pass it.
I mean that Regia swap out there. So what was it that you could swap out in place of a Warhound? So that Regia would become 2 Warlords, a Warbringer, and 2
Two Warhounds.
Warhounds.
Mm-hmm.
But you can only swap the mandatory components. So that does mean you could swap a Regia. You could, I don't know why you would, but that would be a 2 Warlord, 1 Warbringer Regia, at which point you would have no Warhounds. And at 1750 game, you would be pushing to get all of that and 1 Warhound into a 1750, I think, off the top of my head, if you're factoring in 75 points worth of tracking gyros on those 3. So it's heavy, but like you say, it's expensive. I mean, we see it with the Extergimus maniples when they're running 3 Warlords, and usually when we see it's like 3 Warlords and a detached Warhound or Banner of Knights to make up the points. Activation advantage is a thing. Do you think that this is a trait which scales better the bigger the games that you play?
Yeah, I think with this one, 1750 is a squeeze, But when you start going to those 2K games, it like opens up obviously that axiom as well. Taking double warlords in an axiom will become more manageable. So yeah, I think 2K games you're going to see it used a lot more than you are in the smaller points.
Well, that's a you could have a triple warlord fortis as well out of that, which would take some shifting. That would take some serious shifting.
Yeah.
But again, quite expensive. But I'm guessing by what you're saying, you favour the lighter maniples then, controversially.
Yeah, so for me, I favour the stuff that's already like inbuilt with it. So Raptura for Krytos, and as you guys know, the Corsair as well for
Yeah.
Krytos.
Let's park that conversation and we'll come back to that in a little bit. But yeah, interesting rule set. Does offer quite a bit of flexibility, but I think it really does come down to what point-sized games you're playing with, because certainly the Regia seems like a great idea, having another heavy titan that you can share shields with until you actually work out how many points that's going to cost you, which is a lot. Um, I do like the idea of a Fortis, like a triple Warlord, double Reaver Fortis. I think if you were playing like a 2K game or something and you could squeeze all of that in, I think that would be an interesting list. But
Absolutely.
yeah, let's move on. So the next one here, Legio specific stratagem, one of two. This one is costs 3 points. Stu's already got a grin on his face because he likes to nom at the plate of this quite often. This is Civilization's Ruin. God-breaking maniples are methodical in their destruction of the battlefield, turning forests into seas of flames, buildings into clouds of dust and ash, and the ground into a cracked and desolate wasteland. This stratagem can be purchased by any Legio Krytos player. Reveal this stratagem in any strategy phase. For the duration of that round, enemy units hit by an attack made by friendly Legio Krytos Titans with a weapon with the Quake trait suffer the effects of the Quake trait, even if the hit was deflected by the target's shields. This stratagem does not affect Legio Krytos Knights issued with split fire orders if the order was issued after the stratagem was played. Civilization's Ruin, 3 points, cornerstone, right?
Yeah, I think I would say arguably probably one of the best strats in that book for a Legio. Yeah, because it doesn't obviously when you play it, it also includes the fact that you can first fire and still get that quake off, which is in a game where it's arguably about movement, is just devastating to your opponent.
And this is probably up there with offensive surge as well. I think is one of the standout Legio traits. Offensive surge being that of Furians. Um, we'll see later on when we come to it. There's ways that you can make this even more rude, but it's it's shields as well, so it's not discriminatory between void shields or ion shields. So quaking some knights early in the game is, it's a big deal, slowing them down considerably. And like you say, like especially with the match play guide that we've got, often there needs to be an early game push to go and secure an objective. Especially we live in the days of retrieval and push forwards and those type of ones, which you need to go and get something or get something somewhere. Halving somebody's movement, even straight off the bat. I think you play this early, right? I don't think this is something you sit on.
Yeah, so normally for me, first turn is when I'm using this.
And there's not a lot that you can really do about it if you're playing stacked up with Quake, which as Krytos you would want to be, to make the most of this. Um, when I've played against it, all you can really do to mitigate this is choose which Titans you're going to let be quaked, because you can't protect anything. And the only sort of way of getting around this that I found really is sitting your own Titans in your own concealment barrage or something. Like if you need to get, and I used this in a game against you, didn't I, Stu? Like I wanted to get a Reaver up the field. I moved that Reaver into a concealment barrage because he was my close combat Reaver and he was the guy I needed to get up. And if I hadn't have done that, he would have been doing nothing on my board edge until the end of the next movement round, and it would have just been a disaster. So you sacrifice other pawns on the board for the things that you want to protect. 3 points, though, it's expensive, but do you use this every game? Would there ever be a game playing Krytos that you wouldn't take this?
As soon as I'm playing Krytos, when I'm doing that now with the match play guide, when I'm doing a strat hand, that will be the first strat into that hand every time. I think it's just as we'll see in a little bit with the weapon upgrades Krytos get as well, it starts becoming like just an automatic inclusion into your strat hand.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Any
definitely
parting
something that
thoughts on?
can.
Sorry, Johnny. Go ahead.
No, that's right. It's something that can really dictate the flow of the game if you do play it early on as well. You know, the fact that you don't even have to break voids is just it. Yeah, it seems like an auto take.
Well, in this game, we obviously we're not not a fan of those gotchas, those kind of gotcha moments, right? I don't really like them too much, but this is something. I mean, you need to be prepared that they will have this. Just like if you're playing against a Furians player, you need to be prepared that they're going to have offensive surge in their strat hand, and they're probably going to use it. But it's there's not much you can really do about it. Like, and if you aren't prepared for it, it can really catch you with your trousers down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We'll move on to the next stratagem then, shall we? This one's a single point. This is called Destroyer of Cities. Some of these names of these stratagems for Krytos sounds like how Peter Core would name his Titans. Are you getting that same fight? That's a bit of an in-joke, really. Destroyer of Worlds, World
Yeah,
Destroyer, Death of
yeah.
Galaxies, Galaxy Death. Yeah. I don't
Oh.
know if Pete listens to this, but if he does, Pete, come on, get some original names for your Titans, mate. uh, anyway, Destroyer of Cities. Yeah, I just feel like they ran out of ideas for naming that stratagem, really, didn't they?
Mhm.
Or they couldn't be bothered with coming up with something a bit more interesting. The swirling flame of a dying world can be a hostile environment, even for great god machines like a battle titan. The god breakers routinely endured these adverse conditions and developed tactics to deal with them. This stratagem can be purchased by any Legio Krytos player. Reveal this stratagem in any strategy phase. For the duration of that round, when targeting terrain, Titans of the Legio Krytos add 2 to the strength of the weapons. In addition, all Legio Krytos Titans reduce the strength of hits suffered as a result of dangerous terrain by 2 to a minimum of 0. So before we kind of go into this,
Next.
yeah, well, yeah, targeting terrain is a rule, but it's an optional rule. So generally speaking, unless you've agreed with your opponent beforehand, that isn't going to be in play. Some people like using it for the nice, cool narrative feel that it can add to the game. The dangerous terrain thing, I guess, could be more useful. But yeah, Johnny's made his opinion clear. Stu, what's yours?
Yeah. I don't think in the year and a half I've been playing Krytos, probably longer, I've never taken it. Never touched it.
This feels to me like a bit of a hark back to what they were before. Like they didn't want to completely strip out everything that they had before, and they wanted to leave something in there to, like nod to it. It's only a point, it's not a lot. It ultimately comes down to whether or not you play with those optional rules or not. If you do, I could imagine it being, useful if you play that way. I've never played that way. I've never met anybody who's played that way, but it all comes
Yeah,
down to what you're playing with.
yeah. In my mind, the optional rules for the idea of it is sick. And if your Titans are like falling over into buildings, like it'd be cool to see like that building get rightfully destroyed by a Titan falling into it, right? I cannot see in any game of Titanicus where you would actively choose to shoot a terrain piece
instead
over
of the Titan.
an enemy Titan that stood behind it, right? Like, it's not going to happen. And then, yeah, cool, dangerous train stuff is nice, I guess, but you have to play it in the stratagem phase. So unless you're like, I want to cross this chasm really badly with my warlord, okay, just, you know.
Other than a terrain feature, though, which you've already agreed is dangerous terrain, scatterable mines, I think that's the only other. I think technically speaking, if you play with it, when a Titan's destroyed, it counts as dangerous terrain. Like, it leaves a crater behind, it counts as dangerous terrain. If you play with that. That's not an optional rule, but it's like if you happen to have craters, which you can if you go onto our Patreon and sub up to £5 a month, there is a free STL for a destroyed Warhound Titan, with more to be added soon. Anyway, plug over. But unless you have them,
pretty much the opinion that I think most people have when reading that strat, and they said I've never seen it used.
It's rare that every trait across a Legio's selection is amazing or useful. Like, there's a few, right? There's a few up there. It seems to be that what we consider to be tier A either have a solid all round okay rules, or decent rules, or they've got a handful of really standout game making rules. So I'm not surprised that this one's a bit pants. You've already got Civilizations through, and you don't need any other stratagem points, to be honest. Right, shall we move on to the cherry on the top of the cake, the quake on top of the quake?
Quake.
I'll have a cherry with my quake. So Legio specific war gear, Earthbreaker missiles. Earthbreaker missiles are designed to burrow into the ground before detonating, tearing the terrain apart in showers of broken earth. These weapons were used extensively by Legio Krytos to bring down fortifications, but they also proved effective in slowing the advance of enemy maniples. A Legio Krytos Warlord or Reaver Titan that is equipped with Apocalypse missile launchers or an Apocalypse missile launcher can take Earthbreaker missiles as an upgrade for 25 points for a Warlord Titan and 15 points for a Reaver Titan. When firing the Titan's Apocalypse missile launchers, the player can choose to either use its normal profile or reduce its dice value to 4 for a Warlord Titan or 2 for a Reaver Titan, and give it the Quake trait. Earthbreaker missiles increase their strength by 5 when resolving damage against terrain. So let's just ignore that last bit again. The 5 against terrain. I think this was one. You had 1 dice or 2 dice, didn't you, in the original version of Krytos? This was here, or a version of this existed in the previous incantation of Krytos, but I think it was significantly less dice.
Yeah, I don't remember whether you had the option to even switch between. Did it not just flat out replace it?
I can't. It's been that long ago since I bothered reading the old rules that. I seem to remember it was like a light version of this. I think the only thing to kind of call out here is this is obviously a weapon upgrade, and there is some community differences of opinion as to what constitutes as an upgrade. So, for instance, this only really counts if you're taking the heavier Warlord, but you. Actually, does it say? You know what?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
It doesn't. Quite often, these upgrades say something along the lines of, as long as another upgrade is not affecting that weapon. Certainly, like with the Atarus missiles, it says the same. But this actually doesn't. So that there's no dispute here. You can take. The point I was going to make is that some people consider tracking gyros to be an upgrade to the weapon, or some people consider it to be an upgrade to the Titan. We've always considered it to be to the Titan because that's the wording, but I can see how it's anticipated. But I can see how it can be interpreted both ways because it does change the arc of the weapon. So it's another one of those janky rules, and you play it however you want to play it. But that's not actually a consideration here at all. So 25 points or 15 points for a Reaver, you're getting another optional Quake.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks, Stu.
It's
Yeah.
Appreciate you coming.
Yeah, so when I've always geared out, I play kind of medium class Titans, and the reason being is Reavers is just 15 points, a flat 15 points to have them. As soon as you go for the Warlord, obviously, you're going to be spending 50 points because you're going to take tracking gyros and a Warlord, and then you're going to upgrade the missiles. So it's just a pet preference on points, but yeah, when you combine that with Civilization's Ruin, suddenly your Reavers or Warlords are now quaking through shields, which is absolutely insane.
And again, to your point with the Reavers, 360-degree line of sight, and they can barrage. So, even if you can't see your target, you can still go, you know what? I'm going to try anyway at a -2. If you're over 30 inches away, it's only a -1. So I think, it's, to your point as well around the points, that would be 25 points to outfit a Reaver with an Apocalypse missile launcher and Earthbreaker missiles. The Warlord it's 15 points, isn't it, for a Warlord's Apocalypse missile launcher carapace? Is it 15 points?
Yeah, 15 points.
So then that becomes 40 points with the 25 points, becomes 65 points if you want the tracking gyros. So for the price of one upgrade, let's face it, you're going to be taking the tracking gyros. One upgrade to the Warlord, you could get nearly not far off 3. What's the maths? Oh, what did I say? 65 and 25. So yeah, you can get 2.5 Reavers outfitted with these.
Yeah. And the benefit to that is obviously the more they're outfitted, the more things you can hit with it.
Combined with everyone first firing, turn 1, civilization ruins popped, and 5 Titans are firing Earthbreaker missiles.
And not to dwell too
Yikes.
much on Quake, but like if you are shooting somebody with Quake in that movement phase in the first fire, it's until the end of the next movement round. So you're impacting them on that round. If they're full striding them, that you're affecting them in that combat phase, and you are then affecting them again the following movement phase. So, even if you shoot them obviously in the combat phase, you're affecting them in the following movement phase. But first firing that, okay, you're sacrificing all of your movement to deny them some movement, but you're potentially impacting them like for 3 phases of the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's good.
I mean, you say not to focus on Quake, but I mean, that is Krytos to me. That's the first thing I think of when I hear Krytos, is me avoiding every opportunity to place you with my Volper, because there's no point if it's there really against the Quake list. Like, if you're relying on a lot of movement, you're really gonna, in a game that's already, like Stu said, already really movement heavy, and movement really dictates the flow and the outcome of the game. If you're then also relying on being a very fast moving army, buckle up. It's going to be a rough ride.
Yeah. It's kind of like the antithesis, isn't it, to the melee list. When you can do that, I know it says it favors the heavier Titans, the heavier chassis, and obviously you get the Quake cannons on the Warlords, and you can get the Quake cannons on the Warbringers. But I think that it sort of lulls you into this sense of wanting to go down the Warlord route and taking those kind of weapons. And it's a little bit kind of counterintuitive to go out, you know what, actually, no, like it's all you need is missiles. All you need is some Apocalypse missile launchers. Yeah. It is very good. I want a Krytos list. I want to play with Krytos. Not because I consider them to be pretty damn good, but because it seems like fun. I mean, I think it's one of those. Are you having fun? You don't look like you're having fun, but just so you know, I'm having loads of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, for most people now, uh, the first tournaments, people weren't expecting it or didn't know just how bad it would be. But now people are kind of getting prepared for it and trying to, because I mean, what like we've talked about all the benefits. One of the counters to that is yes, you're having to do it first turn. Vox Blackout on Krytos, you'll suddenly see them not using Civilization's Ruin. Obviously, because you're skipping that whole phase, and that could put a Krytos player on the back foot.
You know what is a surprise though? I mean, to your point there, I think the Traitor book came out only 3 months or something before Beachhead when you brought them to Beachhead. So, like you say, I think there was still everyone was learning about corruptions, learning how all of that was going to impact the game. But we touched on this in the previous podcast about the legios which were taken. There's a shocking omission from that list, which I was talking about earlier on with you, Johnny. Um, there's no Krytos. There was no Krytos at Beachhead. That's right. I didn't see any. You didn't see any. You didn't see any.
Well, I mean, normally it's me playing them, isn't it? At this time,
Yeah.
I was team loyalists.
Yeah, but then we saw a few in the summer, didn't we? Because you had them, Grant had them. There was at least two, I think, in the summer. Um, but it's just interesting that there was the choice of nothing. There was no Krytos players out this time because they seem to be they've always been popular with people from a lore perspective and from a painting color scheme perspective. Even when the rules were rubbish, people still collected them, still really enjoyed them. And I've seen a lot more Krytos kind of coming through. In fact, we did a. Let's just have a quick quick look because we did a survey of the Titan legions across the Facebook 2018 group to see how popular certain legios were. So just I'm going to just pull up because we haven't published this at this point. Hopefully, we will by the time that this goes out. Legio Krytos came in 8th most popular legio, with 29 out of the sample of 300 and something, 370 people ish. Collected Krytos. So a very popular Legio, but not represented at all at Beachhead, which I've only just realised, and I think that's a shocking omission. For me now, it's up there with the Furians, it's up there with the Gryphonicus as to the ones that you tend to see every time. Yeah,
I can't think of any distinct reason why. Maybe it's just it does seem very strange that there wasn't any.
well, especially when you consider what the event was. I don't want to dwell too much on the Beachhead event, but attackers, defenders, skirmishers. Krytos, I think, would have been incredibly versatile to fill a number of those, like defender role and the skirmisher role. Well, to be honest, all of them. I think it would have been quite versatile across all. Anyway, I digress. If you want to hear more about our Beachhead stats, go listen to the podcast that we recorded earlier, which precedes this one. We're talking about Legio Krytos, and now
So,
we get to
speaking
talk.
of,
Yes.
a very quick question for Stu. So, do you find that when you're using the Quake version of like the carapace weapons, how do you like deal with shields? Right? Do you notice like it a little bit trickier to actually strip some shields before being able to actually damage the Titans, or
So
do you load out your Titans in a way that you make up for it?
yeah, I think after we finish with the rules, we're going to talk about like lists. So I'll go into a bit more deep diving that. But generally, I'll take the missiles. I'll try to quake them, and that gives me like at least another turn to strip shields. When the shields go down, or if the shields are close to going down, I will not fire the missiles first, wait for the shields to drop, and then hit them with the quake missiles again. Now the shields are down, and you just try to continuously place that Titan under quake. Yeah,
Nice. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think if you're first firing as well, Like if you're doing it on the turn that your civilization's ruining, hopefully the majority of your quaking has happened in the movement phase, which gives you then all of the combat phase to fire them as normal missiles. I assume.
It just depends on what you're playing against. Fast Warhound lists, um, you're going to first fire into one Warhound, and then that Titan's going to and then in the shooting phase, that Titan's going to fire into a different Warhound. So you're quaking multiple Titans. However, if it's something a bit more heavy, yeah, you can quake them in the movement and then just swap back to regular missiles until you strip their shields from them.
That is such a huge benefit as well. Again, it's another exception to the rule, like with the Legio trait being able to switch. It's a little bit more in depth in that it lets you choose between using Earthbreaker or Earthshaker missiles. Whereas, again, not to harp on about Tritonus, you have the choice of the stripping of the shields, but no different profile or anything like that.
Yeah, you can't turn it off and on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or have two different like damage profiles or something similar.
Yeah, and it's just exceptionally well pointed. Like whenever I see a piece of war gear which is sort of 25 points plus, that's when war gear gets expensive, because you're usually making some kind of sacrifice in your list to take that piece of war gear. And obviously the war lord version of it is 25 points, but 15 points. I think 15 points is a real sweet spot in sort of value for money for most war gear. Like the reinforced armor for Audax is 15 points a Titan. So that is something. It's just such good value. You would take that on everything. And I think it's a similar case in here that at 15 points you would take it wherever you could take it, because even if you've got 5 of them, you're still only talking 75 points. Did my maths work out there? Yeah, I think it did.
Sure.
Look at me, mental maths. I don't know. No comments. Alex can't count. Anyway, let's move on to the personal traits. Personal traits are the interesting ones, because when you've got like a whole swathe of like good traits, personal traits is where you usually see them making up the chaff. So loads of good stuff over here. Don't look at the personal traits. So let's see if it's the same with Krytos, shall we? Or if they're an exception to the rule. So the first one here, godlike contempt. Routinely scouring worlds and extinguishing armies gave many Princeps of the Legio Krytos delusions of divinity, something their allies encouraged by treating their titans as temples dedicated to war, and the crews as the high priests that worshipped within them. The Princeps Titan may still make command checks even if another friendly unit has already failed its command check. How is that different or better than like Iron Resolve?
Ironclad Tyrant.
Sorry, Ironclad Tyrant. Yeah.
I think personally Ironclad Tyrant's better than this one, because this is just the senioress is allowed to issue an order even if another Titan's failed. Where obviously Ironclad Tyrant gives you that kind of for every Titan in the mana pool,
Yeah.
rather than just
It won't necessarily be your Princeps you want to get the order off on, right? And I think that was why I was trying to kind of rationalize in my head. I was like, it seems like basically the same trait, but restricted.
I think one of the one that you might see it more in is corrupt Princeps and Euruses, because obviously then they don't get access to the Ironclad Tyrant, but they still
Yes.
get access to Godlike Contempt.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
There it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, like the match play guys removed the whole concept of rolling a d3. Now you pick. I think that's the only scenario, right, that you would probably be picking that in that corrupted maniple kind of setup. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Next one.
Go for it.
Worldbane, continuing the Peak Core naming convention. It's not enough for a Princeps to merely bring down cities or reduce fortresses to ruins. Instead, they seed the earth with unexploded munitions or purposefully rupture fuel lines, toxic waste containers, and huge energy cells to mar the battlefield. Any blocking terrain destroyed by the Princeps Titans becomes dangerous terrain, if it was not already. If the optional rules for destroying terrain are not in use, and this personal trait is randomly chosen, the controlling player may instead choose a different personal trait from the table.
I mean, that last line says it all, really, doesn't it?
Yeah. You may as well just
Again,
put if you picked this one, just pick again.
again, if you're
I see
playing,
what you're doing in GW, but just you don't need
yeah,
yeah, I
but
don't
again,
know.
if you're playing that narrative side of it, right, where and you might be using Destroyer of Cities, you can take this equally terribly named Princeps trait, and just double down on blowing up buildings. I mean, your enemy will be tearing you to pieces, but you'll have a nice flat kind of plain
Well,
to fight over by the time you've finished.
I definitely think like there's a couple of ones with Kratos that if you're playing more match play, more tournament, you just need a black marker pen for some of the stuff in your book, and this might be one of them.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, 99% of the time, you would never take this. If you're a narrative player, you might play it. If you play it non-competitively and for the narrative and enjoy the aspect of blowing up buildings, you might take this. Even then, I don't know if you would. You'd probably take something else. The last trait, Path of Iron. Lesser enemies are crushed under the feet of the Princeps Titan, their crew barely slowing their massive war machine to consider those they have destroyed or not decide. The Princeps Senioris' Titan may make a single smash attack during the movement phase, provided it is against an enemy model of a lower scale than itself. Stop the Titan when it comes within range of the target and resolve the attack, then complete its movement as normal. When making these kinds of smash attacks, the Titan may move through models of scale 3 or less, provided that they can completely cross the enemy model's base. This attack does not prohibit the Titan from making attacks in the following combat phase. So, I can see a use there. I mean, scale 3 and smaller, you're talking armigers. It can move over. What's a Questoris? Is that 3 or 4? 3. 4? Shows how often I use Questoris. Let me think.
Yeah.
No, yeah, because a Porphy's 5, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Cerastus is 4,
Or
which Questoris must be 3.
yeah, because Thrastus is much bigger than her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so being able to cross your own units is something you can't normally do, and you
Mhm.
obviously can now. I guess it gives you an option. If you fail your charge, you can still do a smash attack.
The other way to do it is if you've got if you get outflanked by knights, or you get into combat, you don't die, you can kick them as you walk over them and out of that combat.
It could be very good against screening units. Yeah, really, really
Yeah.
good.
No getting surrounded by blobs of knights. You just walk over them. Because it didn't say friendly models, did it? Is any models? Yeah, any model of scale 3 or less. So
Which I mean, insanity that an armiger could actually stop a warlord from going anywhere. But that is the minutiae of the game's rules, and not
yeah.
I feel like that should just be a base rule in AT as a whole. Anyway, you can just walk through, walk through small stuff.
Yeah, 0 shits given for knights. Thank you very much.
Yeah, literally. I mean, you can step over buildings. You can step over a armiger. You know what I mean? It's,
Just
Is
being,
it from Ghostbusters 2? You're like a buzzing of flies to him. Any Ghostbusters 2 fans? Or are you guys too young for that shit?
oh
I
yeah,
was,
no,
Okay, right, okay.
yeah, man, come on, I'm not that young.
I was
No,
going Scooby Doo, mate, and I would have got away with it if it wasn't for those pesky armigers.
Yeah,
You know?
and the firearm.
I mean, I think
And you
that's
can tell it's 11 o'clock, can't you?
yeah, you really can. But I think that's the best one out of their traits. Are we agreed on that?
Yeah.
Are
Yeah.
we agreed in that, as I said
Um,
before, the awesome traits of a Legio are made up with a pile of shit?
Yeah, you get like 2 out of 3. It's very rare you get all 3 being spot on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I say, like there is some play, but I don't know why you would be taking any of those over dominant strategist, over favored by fortune, over ironclad tyrant. Um, yeah, I can't really. I think even what's the other one? Blessed by the Omnis or something. The repair one.
mm,
Um,
I'll have that.
I don't think there's any swift killer. You know, like they're all. I think all of the ones in the main book are going to serve you better than what's in here.
Yeah.
So that is the down. We've gone through the up. Those are the down. Let's just forget about the Princeps abilities and move on, shall we? So those are the rules. I think we can all agree some pretty strong rules. We still haven't done like our traitor loyalists ranked video. But my opinion of Krytos is that they are, if they aren't a tier 1, they're a high tier 2 Legio, which is an amazing flip from going from arguably the only tier 5 Legio that we were considering in their previous rules to going
Mm.
pretty high up the table. Might not be top, but I think they're in that kind of A minus to A kind of range when it comes to traits and what you can do with them. But let's move on and talk about the maniples that you would take with these. So we've already discussed as part of their kind of I've closed the book now and I can't remember what the rule is, but their Titan swap out
Doom
ability,
of Worlds.
Doom of Worlds. There we go. Um, they were really running out of ideas naming some of these traits, weren't they?
I'm pretty sure you could search for all of these named traits in any other GW publication and find
Yeah,
them used again.
I think that was the name of one of my metal dreadnoughts back in the 90s.
Mm,
You know, that I'd written in kind of like biro on my goblin green base was
There's probably
Doom of
like
Worlds.
5 demons called Worldbane as well. You know what I mean? Like it's just all named characters you can buy from GW. Yeah, no, it's quite funny, isn't it?
Yeah, so we obviously we're talking about that. We're talking about the heavier maniples. Stu, you had some interesting kind of revelations. You were talking about kind of the lighter maniples, talking about the Ruptura, and that you as a player have kind of like don't really sort of favour the heavier maniples. So I you took Krytos to our 2 events last year, and obviously placed first in both of those. Like, why don't you give us a little bit of a lowdown of how the of what you think are good maniples for Krytos, but then also how you've played them and how you've won tournaments with them.
So so the first maniple, which I've taken to both of yours, is a Corsair, just a standard Corsair. Reason being, and the way I build them is I normally have 3 kind of 24-inch range gun reavers. So the melter, the Gatling. One of them has a missile pod with Earthshakers, and the other 2 have Vulcans or um,
All kites.
that's the one. Tune guns, I was going to say, but yeah, Volkites. And then 2 backfield reavers with volcanoes, Earthshaker, missile apox, and lasers. The reason I think this works the way it does with Krytos is because, yes, first fire, civilizations ruin, quake them, but then because of the Corsair trait, it allows me to outmaneuver my opponent and outmove my opponent, which is massive with match. Even now with the match play guide, you know, sidestepping round and moving full speed, and the flexibility of a Corsair is just huge when combined with the
So
Quake trait.
so 3 of those are going to be on first fire if you can get off those abilities in the first phase. They're going to be sacrificing their movement, but you are banking on the fact that the additional mobility that you get from the Corsair maniple is gonna pay dividends later on in the game.
Yeah, pretty much. That's, the Corsair being able to, even if I've kind of found myself in some situations against combat reavers and stuff, staring them down, the Corsair lets me just kind of, do the backwards walk away while still hammering them with shots. And then all it takes is being able to strip their shields. And most of the time, my volcano ones don't even move. Put them on split fire. If you manage to strip a shield of a combat reaver, apox the volcano into them, and then shoot or whatever you want with the other guns. It's just the ability to then hit them with quake. The list I've been looking at now is a Rapturer for just something different. More for the fact that I wanted something a little bit heavier, but not Warlord heavy, if that makes sense. So 3 Reavers and the 2 Warbringers. Obviously, one of the Warbringers. I basically took my Corsair idea, stripped out one of the mid-range Reavers, and put in a mid-range Warbringer breaker.
Bringer.
That's the one.
Definitely not a Warbreaker.
I was like, Warbringer.
That's one of
A
those.
Yeah, got one of them, I think.
Just drop a 1500 point Titan in there. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Warbringer with Bellicosa, Gatlings, and Melter to move up with another 2 Reavers. And then one at the back, Volcano, Laser, and obviously Mori Quake with tracking gyros, because then even the Quake cannon, it's very rare it's going to be getting the -1 to hit for being 24 inches away from something. Or if I've got to that situation, I've done something kind of wrong.
Yeah.
And yeah, so just a little bit of a change for a 2K list, but that has all the Reavers in the 2K list have Earthshaker missiles, so they can sit back for the first turn and first fire 4 quakes.
I've just had this thought as you were talking there. What I think might have been a big miss. I don't know if it was a big miss because this may have made Krytos even more game-breakingly good. But it's a shame that they didn't do something with the Arcus maniple, where maybe like a swap out of the Arcus maniple, like a Warhound for a second Warbringer in the Arcus maniple. Because they're supposed to be all about siege, aren't they? And the Arcus maniple is the indirect firing maniple. And yeah, instead of maybe I don't think they needed to put the Regia swap out in there. But I think it would have made a lot of sense to kind of give a little bit more love to those you got me now. Warbringer chassis maniples, which don't necessarily see quite so much love. So I think that's a little bit of a shame. But yeah, but I think with the Quake, even if you are on a -1, because it's the big massive pie plate, you've still got a good chance that you're going to be hitting something. Even on especially if your civilization's ruining, you can just then stick that. You're going to bunch up together, are you? Okay, well, have that with one shot and hit 3 of you.
Yeah, that's definitely the more thinking behind it, and I still feel that in the movement phase, Warbringers can keep up with the Reavers. I mean, the other ones to look at that I might potentially do, just to have Warhounds, is the Axiom with the 2 Warlords in it.
The Ruptura maniple. Now, their special abilities on a catastrophic damage from a war bringer. Everybody gets to move as if it was the movement phase. Does that mean that you can, if you were on first fire, you could first fire again? That's why I've got the book in front of me, because I'm not sure the answer to this.
Does it say they make? I thought it said Reavers take a single movement.
Once per round, a Reaver Titan. No, blah blah blah. That's the normal push. When an enemy unit suffers catastrophic damage as a result of an attack made by the Warbringer Nemesis from this maniple, oh yeah, may make a move as if it is the movement phase. Okay, so it wouldn't be able to. So the main ability with that is if you're on charge orders, and getting those kind of like additional charge
But
off.
weirdly enough, I've got no combat arms in it. None. So I just want, like, if the push goes off, it'll be trying to get stuff into outflanking positions and stuff like this, into the sides.
Yeah, I've seen a similar list versus like when Ben was still playing, he used to take Corsair. Of course he did. Like he was Captain Corsair.
Oh, the old memes come back again.
But he used to take Presagius Corsair. And kind of similarly to you, he was all about the 24 inches, no combat weapons, just all about like hitting at 24 inches. And with the Presagius abilities to get bonuses at long range, works very, very well with like melter cannons and things like that. I think that would be an interesting kind of counterpoint to Krytos, the Presagius counterpoint. I think that would be quite cagey because you'd have the movement advantage of Krytos, but at those sort of ranges, Presagius would have maybe the shooting advantage when you are in range.
Yeah, I do think being able to, reroll location is very good. It gives you the ability to try to negate at least the fact you can't cool shot with template weapons.
Yeah. Anyway, that's for another deep dive at some point in the future. So other than the rupture or the Corsair, like, I mean, would you do some of the heavier maniples? Is she...
I've tried. I know we haven't. I know it's came up, I think, once, but I've tried. I've tried a couple of the heavier maniples with Hammer of Tyrants in it, just to see what Hammer of Tyrants was like more more than anything else. And honestly, it was one of those ones that I used a Warlord, and I was moving it. Got some charges in it. Someone charged me. Took him out, and I just sat there and was like, kind of wish I had the movement of Reavers again. Really, like that was my experience. Like went through my head was, I wish I had the flexibility of a Reaver.
Do you think that is your preference as a player, or do you think that is more kind of Krytos as a Legio?
I think it's me as a player. I think for me, my go-to lists will have more Reavers in them. Like I've just as I brought to Beachhead 2023, I still brought an Astorum Corsair and an Astorum Ferox, so still leaning into the Reavers. I just love them. I think they're so versatile in the game. They can move. They have good weapon options on them. Bit of everything really. But that's just my play style with them.
They are the heavy lifters, really, aren't they? They're your objective takers, your objective holders, your damage dealers, your combat titans. Okay, they can be a little bit fragile, but then they've still got like the reactor to be able to push when you need to, and they've got enough servitor clades to be repairing things. So yeah, they really are the workhorse of AT. The Reavers. You mentioned there though, the Titan of Legend, Hammer of Tyrants. Now, Titans of Legend is something which certainly newer players probably have got very little kind of understanding or even awareness of, because this was a pack of terminal cards, one for loyalists, one for traitors, which was released really early in the game. I want to say like 2019, around that sort of time. And Hammer of Tyrants is arguably one of they're a real mixed bag, aren't they? They're either game breakingly good, or they like the Gryphonicus and Furians ones are sickeningly good for the points, to being really quite lackluster and a bit meh. They're generally always better than whatever it is their normal class of Titan. They're usually slightly better or introduce an interesting kind of ability or quirk. But like Hammer of Tyrants is the one for Legio Krytos. Why don't you can you talk a bit more around him?
Yeah, so Hammer of Tyrants is it's Warlord chassis. It comes with Sun Furies and Bellicosas automatically. You could pick what you want on the carapace.
And when you say automatically, it's baked into the points, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So these are
included.
more expensive than a Warlord because they come with those, but they do work out, similar in points.
His little trick is basically when you fire a weapon using the maximal fire trait, rolls of ones don't increase the reactor heat for him. And I think it's the first. I've got his card. The first time it lands is it a critical hit? You put the reactor back on him as well.
That rings a bell, yeah.
Uh,
We have
Everyone's quickly looking one up.
yeah.
Standard podcast of ours, isn't it? Man looks at a thing on internet, but
Yeah.
the look, we theory crafted this, me and Ben, and Ben put it into practice once when he took Krytos. Normally, obviously, you've only got the Sun Fury, so 4 dice. That no ones is kind of like doesn't come up very often. It's not really going to change much. We did work out that if you're willing to spend 4 stratagem points and put some apocalypse missile launchers up on top, then you can get strength 8 indirect firing apocalypse missile launchers, which never generate you any heat.
Yeah, so mine I went with set in the background back there. I went with Gatlings and put the 4 points into
Strength 9.
Yeah, Gatlings. That's not even talking if you start putting them in the Sturgimus.
Yeah, I mean,
But-
you have to be a little bit lucky there because you have to randomly roll the experimental weapon, right? And that could be you could end up with a strength 16 bellicosa instead.
Well, that's still pretty devastating either way. But yeah, you have to be lucky.
Yeah.
Well, it's a 50-50 chance because you ignore the fact that it's got the Sun Fury already.
Yeah.
But yeah, I used him. He's fun. He's cool to take out, but the points and the maneuverability of him, I was like, I just as me as a player, just gravitate back towards Reavers. I think
You wouldn't be tempted in a bigger pointed game to take him as like a detached Titan with a Corsair?
I think if big points, I probably would. I'd probably just bring him out. Or what I've got 5 Reavers, 2 Warbringers, and a Warlord. So I'd try to fix him in somehow and make him work. But when it's the smaller points, I wouldn't bring him in.
Yeah.
Plus the fact, smaller point games, if you're going for that, heavy hitting punch with your top guns or whatever, you're not going to be playing Civilization's Ruin for it. That's the trade off. And as we discussed in this episode, it's a kind of a instant take for Civilization Ruin.
Okay, so we're nearly there, I think. I just want to touch very quickly on the subject of corruptions, which are obviously brought in with the Traitor Legio's book. Some Legios do it better than others. Where do you come down with corruptions on Krytos?
My personal opinion is Krytos don't do corruptions. I think I think there's points that you'd rather put on upgrades, apox, even to bastion shielding, but because you're going to be going for first fire and command checks and stuff, as soon as you start adding corruptions, you're affecting your command value of your Titan. You're not going to be getting those first fires off, which is a big deal breaker for me. And I don't feel like they need them to do better, if that makes sense. There's no benefit to giving them corruptions to what they've already got.
You wouldn't be tempted to kind of put the what is it, the regenerative carapace or something on the bigger Titans, or
50 points, though.
I know.
50
Well, I'm
points.
thinking, if you went like the Mandatum, a Mandatum Manipul, you got some Reavers in that. No, not Mandatum, Myrmidon. You got some Reavers and a Myrmidon, don't you? Is there Reavers and a Myrmidon? Shows how often I use it. But you can first fire on a 2+. First fire or split fire on a 2+, which would kind of go against your or mitigate somewhat your corruptions if you did.
It seems like that way around, though. You're almost building your list around just having corruptions for the sake of it, as
Yeah,
opposed to
yeah. The
actually
Myrmidon
just
though,
not needing them.
looking at the Myrmidon, it might have been something that we might have. Again, it's expensive because two warlords in there, but 3 reavers, 2 warlords, bit of versatility there. Few more equate cannons. I don't know. But no, so you're saying basically corruption's not for you.
No, not really. If I was going to do, maybe potential future projects that aren't Krytos will have corruptions in them. But for Krytos, I like them still green and clean, basically.
Green and clean, even though when they renowned or something being filthy because they never clean their titans.
And burning worlds that they stepped on down to like cinder. But, you know,
The soot adds up after. They're actually bright yellow.
yeah.
After all the grime and all the soot of burning civilizations.
Yeah, interesting. No, it's interesting you say that though, because I do believe that there's, not every Legio is good for corruptions. I personally think like Furians. I think are better without corruptions. I think personally, I like Lania Scara without corruptions. I can see why people would take things like Overwhelming Rage and Preternatural Grace on them, but like for me, I quite like them without them. So yeah, interesting. Krytos again. You're kind of coming down on that side as well.
Definitely.
I think shameless plug at this point in time. If you are looking for some content to watch on YouTube, we've just started releasing a series of short lore videos, and the first one we released actually was on the Legio Krytos to tie in with this deep dive. So if you like the sound of Krytos and you want to hear a bit more about their forming and what they were renowned for, there's you can check out one of our short videos on YouTube and listen to me regale you with the story from the Traitor Legios book. But yeah, any parting thoughts from anybody today? I'll take that as a no.
I mean, what can you say, right? They are Quake. That's my parting thought.
Yeah,
Lots and lots
all
of
the
Quake.
I think there's definitely ways to play Krytos that fall into their fluff and their characteristics. Yeah.
Stu,
Quake.
thank you very much for joining us tonight. Brilliant hearing your insight. I hope you don't win too many more tournaments. Start picking some kind of less beardy competitive lists and start giving the other guys a chance, okay?
Didn't you say you'd take my Volper for the next one?
I think I might have to take your if you'll lend me your Volper. I might
man,
bring it to the next one.
they need to see a win, so you can
But
give it a go.
Are they feeling a bit crestfallen, Johnny? They need a win.
I've not removed them from the display cabinet since the VAT rep, so
yeah, it's definitely been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
No, you're welcome.
Thank
Okay,
you for
guys.
joining us.
Well, that's it for our Legio deep dive today on Krytos. If you like what you see today, join us on our Discord server. That is where all the latest and greatest news is disseminated across the universe related to Maximal Fire. We've also got our new website, maximalfire.com, where you can find all of our links and all of our resources that we put out there. So give that a look. And if you do want to support the show, we do have a Patreon, which you can back us from as little as £1, and every little helps us kind of keep putting content out there. So big thank you from me. Thanks again, Stu. Thank you again, Johnny. Just leaves us with enough time to say, as always, go big. I think we need to do a competition which is come up with a better strap line for us or something at some point. Right. Anyway, it's as good as we've got, and we're going to go with it. Okay, go big, go loud, and
go Maximal.